Hi, everyone. I'm Lana Zach. Thank you for joining us. Life is slowly starting to return to normal in Wuhan, China, where the coronavirus epidemic was first documented. After a lockdown that lasted 76 days, people were allowed to leave the city, which had been sealed off from the rest of China for the first time on Wednesday. But as you can see, life in Wuhan is still far from normal. And elsewhere in Asia, the virus is still taking a toll. Over 1.3 billion people are under lockdown in India. The reported number of cases there topping 6,700 on Thursday. And Japan reported over 500 new coronavirus cases Thursday. The country issued a state of emergency earlier this week. CBSN contributor Isaac Stonefish joins me now. He's a senior fellow at the Asia Society Center on U.S. China relations. Isaac, coronavirus cases in the U.S. have far surpassed numbers reported by China. But in a recent article you wrote for the Washington Post, you say that China's numbers might not be reliable. Why is that?
The Communist Party, which rules China, is fairly upfront about their numbers not being accurate and the need for statistics and for journalism and for commentators to serve the party. And so when you have numbers that serve the purposes of a political party, you can't expect them to be true. Also, there's a lot of issues with China not accurately counting the numbers in certain regions, most specifically Xinjiang, which is a region in northwest China where there's an estimated 1 million Muslims in concentration camps.
Well, if China isn't reporting honestly the number of cases, how does that impact its relationship with other countries, including the United States? And how can we be confident that it is, in fact, solved over in China, which the government seems to be indicating by opening the lockdown in Wuhan?
I think on the one hand, it's fantastic that they're opening the draconian lockdown in Wuhan, where there was almost certainly some really awful things that happened without oversight. I think the issue is that there's not going to be a scenario where we're going to be able to trust the numbers that are coming from the Chinese Communist Party. And things are going to get worse in that regard following the expulsion of most American journalists from the Times, the Post, and the Journal, which happened in February. I think the issue is the need for American consumers to, on the one hand, not panic, calm down, be okay with the situation. On the other hand, recognize that what we're seeing in China and the numbers we're hearing are almost certainly very inaccurate.
Well, residents of Wuhan are finally venturing outside of the city for the first time in 11 weeks. I'm wondering, what are you hearing about other Chinese residents? Are they concerned, given that that these numbers aren't necessarily reliable, that there is this mistrust, perhaps, in the government, that the government is, in fact, taking the necessary steps to ensure that there will be no further spread of the virus outside of Wuhan and the greater province?
There's a huge variety of fears and thoughts when it comes to the coronavirus in China. I think some people do appreciate that Beijing did act to stop the spread of the virus. Other people are quite frustrated with letting it go on for so long and suppressing information very early. Some people see this as a sign of national pride that Beijing can now try to use this to take global leadership, and some people are frankly very embarrassed at the shambolic way that Beijing responded and are quite worried about getting the virus from someone from Wuhan. I think we forget that there's a lot of regional variation in the cities and regions in China, and some people from Hubei province have reported being discriminated by people from other provinces.
All right, Isaac, I'm going to ask you a question now that I don't even know if you're prepared to answer, but it is something that I've been wondering about. Given that that China is now lifting the lockdown in Wuhan, that it says at least that it has contained the virus over there, and that it is so far ahead of us in terms of fighting COVID-19. What is the state of research in China in terms of vaccines, in terms of treatments? Given that they're so much farther ahead, I hear from the White House and from researchers here in the United States every day about the progress that they're making making towards these discoveries. And I'm wondering, why isn't China further ahead since they've been fighting this virus for so long?
It's hard to know exactly where they are in terms of the research for a vaccination or for a cure. There are many world-class scientists and doctors, researchers in the Chinese medical system. The system itself is, though, fairly chaotic and makes America's healthcare system look like Sweden's. I think hopefully someone will get this solved sooner rather than later, but it's very difficult to know who's going to win this race. And because of where the United States and China are in terms of political and economic tensions, it's less likely that they would cooperate as they might have in the past. And it's also difficult to know whether that'll spur the individual sides to work quicker on their own, or if the cooperation would have helped get this resolved earlier.
Let's talk about some of the other countries that are fighting COVID-19 right now. In Japan, cases are surging. The country declared that state of emergency that we mentioned, but many residents are still out and about. Does a formal lockdown need to be put into place there? And what would that look like in Japan?
I don't think so. Again, it's hard to know, and I think the real question is, what are residents' tolerance for slightly higher death rates versus less freedom of movement? Japan has a much stronger healthcare system than the United States or China or a lot of other countries that are really struggling with this. And it's also possible that because they've reached sort of accelerated rate later than the United States and China, there might be better medical treatment. There's also some research that suggests the disease spreads slower in warmer climates. So with summer coming up, it's possible that that will slow down the spread, but it's difficult to know what is going to happen or what's next.
Summer sounds so far away, I'll be honest with you. Let's now talk about India. It's under the world's largest lockdown. Has the country's massive stay-at-home order really been effective?
It's certainly been effective in allowing people to stigmatize Muslims and act in ways that I think are counter to India's proud tradition of democracy. It's for different reasons than China. It's somewhat difficult to get very accurate statistics in India. There are so many people who are off the grid, so to speak. But I think my bigger worry with India is less a massive outbreak and more people deciding to use this as an opportunity to attack or oppress marginalized groups in India.
Well, we will continue monitoring that and discussing it with you. Isaac Stonefish, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.